briefly put, Sandra and I, we're both architects and we teach architecture design. And our area of specialty is basically computational design and architecture. So everything that has to do with 3D modeling, agent-based modeling, algorithmic modeling, et cetera, which we have been applying for a long time throughout our career. And a couple of years ago, we started to collaborate with computer science and robotics at the University of Michigan in order to develop design techniques for architecture based on artificial intelligence. And so we've been doing that now for 2.5 years, something like that. And to introduce my students to not only just the technical aspects of AI, but also the cultural aspects of AI, I show them lectures. I give them lectures on art and AI and also music and AI. And doing my research on music and AI is when I found Dadabots. And I was immediately compelled by the work. I think it's amazing. It's as you mentioned just before, CJ, it's visceral. There's something very immediate to it. And it's also surprising how weirdly recognizable it is. And it's something that we have been teaching also in architecture, saying that it has aspects of defamiliarization, estrangement, but there's still elements you recognize, but it's so alien and different and strange at the same time. And all of these sort of emotional responses that you create listening to the music is something that we hopefully can also achieve at some point with architecture. And that being said, that's basically where that would be like the starting point for our conversation.
Sure. I think looking at AI music is a great way to be inspired for architecture. It tells you what it can do over a time-based medium, and yeah, it's very visceral, which is why I love it. So great choice. Learning all about AI metal.
What else?
So
So probably you want to introduce yourselves. I mean, we're super excited to have you here. And would you like to share with us what brought you actually to AI research and how the three of you met and came to work together?
So yeah, Zach and I met when we were interns at Berkeley College. I was learning computer science. He was learning music technology, and we did a skill swap where I taught him to program, and he taught me like Max MSP and Fourier transforms. And we got really interested in machine learning and like the Echo Nest, and that just sent us down a path of learning neural networks and deep learning. And also at the time we were and still huge into avant-garde music. I was making mathcore with a drum machine and a guitar, and Zach was making like experimental hip hop music and weirdo music, and Zach can talk about that. And yeah, we're just listening to lots and lots of Krallis at Berkeley in our office. Thinking, yeah, which is Colin's band, and Colin will talk about that. And we're like, can we make algorithms that can make this kind of crazy mathy proggy music? And that has sent us down this 8-year path. Where yeah, now we publish at academic conferences, and we publish open source code that does this, and we have a growing collaboration base of artists we work with, and yeah, this is our passion.
Yeah,
awesome.
So, as CJ said, I basically didn't know anything about coding outside of making some cool noises on a music language called Max MSP, where you can have some signals and kind of make some cool effects and stuff like that. But that was pretty basic knowledge. I was always wanting to be like more of a hacker, and got into it through just trying to hack with audio and see what I could do beyond the basic sampling and synthesis techniques that have been used for a long time. And I wanted to take a step back from the detail of just making the sound and really like do something new with structure and form. Think about the whole composition as part of the synthesis as well. Look at genre as part of the synthesis material, and compose with style, not just with the more atomic notes. And so I was super excited to meet CJ. As we pointed out, we just like talked so much about what the potential of music and computer science crossover might be, and really just like thought of kind of like very personal projects. Like he mentioned, we were really, listening to a lot of experimental metal, and Carlos was a big band we were into. I just listened to that album probably like, hundreds times and wanted to hear more of it. I just want it to be longer.
I just wanted
it's such a basic thing. And I just hear this, but continual and just never repeat. It's perfect how it is. And so that was really the motivation. We thought about looping first. We're like, what if we just knew all the sectional marks and we just broke that up sectionally as like an analysis and just started shuffling around, and we called it maze metal. It was our first idea. We just get stuck in a maze of a song. And eventually that led to the more sophisticated neural net stuff. And now I work in research at a tech company that does audio fingerprinting. So it's a pretty weird path to get to music research, but yeah, I was really just wanting to make weird music to begin with, and that led to the interest in computer science and artificial intelligence algorithms and stuff like that.
And for you, Colin, how do you how do you see your part in this infamous trio?
Well, I guess I was from what these guys are saying, maybe I was like the sacrificial lamb of music. But no, I'm stoked to have kind of like gotten in on the ground floor with these guys, because what they're actually doing is the kind of stuff that I will like imagine. Yeah, you hear some band do something that maybe like starts to push the boundaries of what's reasonable in music and what seems like it's actually stemming from traditions that we can identify right away. When you hear something that doesn't feel like that, or it feels like it took 2 steps forward instead of 1, that always catches my attention. So the idea that they're sort of trying to look at the act of composition in this whole new way is really interesting to me, because I feel like what gets focused on so often in music is style, like being reductive, taking things away. And it's rare that somebody is thinking more in terms of like, no, let's play up all the aspects of music that are sort of uncomfortable or don't seem to make any sense, and let's push those like even further and see what we get. Because I feel like as a composer myself, that's always sort of what I'm striving for. It's not so conscious, and I'm not one of these guys who's always trying to like one up myself. I think that's kind of a stupid way to be. I like to just let it flow, but I like having the general push of trying to take things towards a realm where if you heard them back, you wouldn't really have a good basis of what's going on, and you would really like at first be pretty confused and baffled as to what you're hearing. And then the more you listen to it or talking to other people about it, you might start to understand some of the processes that come into making it the way it is. And that kind of just opens up your idea about, like Zach was saying, about just structure in general. Like, just one more short thing. I play in this band, Behold the Octopus, which does very progressive, sort of like modern classically influenced metal. And a very common comment about that band is that the music has no structure. And I take a lot of issue with that, because it's the opposite of no structure. It's highly structured music. The structure is maybe a lot more complex than like a normal rock song structure. But to me, that is not no structure. That is far from no structure. In fact, I think it's impossible to have music with no structure. Even something that's complete free improvisation, you're just creating a structure in real time. So there's a bit of an omnipresent idea that I think something that isn't understandable right away means that there isn't any logic behind it. And that's just ridiculous. There's always logic. There's always like a way to interpret anything. There's multiple ways to interpret anything. So I think that these guys kind of have their heads in a good place creatively in terms of a way to introduce AI, you know, not just as a way to like predict what YouTube video you might want to watch next. Instead, they're just like making art with it, which I think is like, yes, exactly. What a great use.
I think that's the beauty of using a computer in the first place. I mean, so to extend what you were able and what you would be able to project, and then taking those tools and going a place further or another place that you have never thought of to be using, you know. So in that scenario, I think I hope, at least I hope that's also how we can use AI in architecture. You know, that was always our goal, to be surprised by the results we could achieve using the computer instead of just not having it. They should not be the same, right? So the results should differ in some way.
Yeah, and also not having it be just an imitation of the way a human brain works. Not having it be just like a shitty stand-in of what a person would do. No, let's have the computer, the AI, the robot, whatever, do something a human would never do. Like that's what's interesting. It's like even with improvisation, I think sometimes, like when I finally started really appreciating free jazz, I was like, oh, they're not trying to write a jazz tune in real time. They're trying to make music that you would never come up with if you sat down and actually thought about it and glued section A to section B. No, they're creating this music that does not function by that logic. It's on a different set of logical connections. So that's cool. It's like, you know, change the intention a little bit to match with what's creating the content.
Exactly. So whatever we can provide, whether it's by you're using the material of music and we are using the material of visual, you know, pixels on a screen, or probably a 3D printed version of it then in real life. But it's really to providing some sort of body for these ongoings in the machine, you know, so what kind of beauty and aesthetics they can create, and doing as least as possible, you know, so for them to have a bit more of this ongoings to be format themselves and materialize themselves. So I think that's the beauty, and that's my personal interest in what I'm doing with the kind of tools and machines. I think what I would be interesting, you know, you're talking about having this sort of that it's unstructured, and I was thinking also, is it some sort of Baroque form of metal that you're producing? You know, with it is highly fractalized and much more in form than probably a simple set of structures. How do you see it? You know, what comes first, complexity or simplicity?
Are you talking about me, like my work specifically?
Your comment on something that is often talked about your work, that people think it's unstructured, and you tell
right.
No, it's the opposite. It's overly structured. You know, it's more implicitly structured. It's more so I was thinking about, you know, the Baroque version of metal, so to speak.
Right. But like, because when I think of Baroque music, let me know if this is kind of what you're getting at. Like, it often has the feeling of more of a stream of like an idea that starts here and it goes, and at the end you're at the end, and it's not like A section, B section, back to the A section. Now here's a C section. It does incorporate some of that too, because you have something like sonata form, which is just A B A, and that's all over like all kinds of classical music. But the thing is, that can be abstracted so much, even in Baroque music, you know, even before the classical period and Mozart even hit, that can be abstracted so much in Bach's work that it sounds like nothing ever repeats, even though Bach's music can be analyzed mathematically, like very easily.
Because he was interested in mathematics more than in music. I mean, he was using music also as a tool to experience it mathematically. At least I think that was some.
Right. I mean, I think from what I understand, he was sometimes translating them back and forth. You know, you have the piece where he spelled his name in notes. You know, so he's clearly having extra musical ideas like that, where like, oh, what if I took this thing that has nothing to do with music and found out a way to musically interpret it? That could be cool. And then I'm sure sometimes he was probably just sitting down at the harpsichord and messing around and being like, oh, that sounds good. Let me like see what I can do with that. I just feel like he probably wasn't only making music in that highly conceptual way, but he made so much goddamn music that it had to be like all of the above, I think, with him. But I think he's a really good example of this conversation of structure, where something that has a structure that's maybe not so easily perceivable at first can be sort of chalked up as structureless or as aimless or as random. And the thing is, like, in a way, there's kind of no such thing as random, because once you make an algorithm to make random music, or you yourself say, I'm going to pick random notes and make a riff or something, once you've done that, then there it is. It's a structure, it's music, it can be interpreted, it can be deconstructed, and you can be like, oh, well, this is here because of this, and you can come up with whatever reasoning after the fact that you want. So I think it's important to realize that like all sound is structure if you feel like considering it that.
Maybe it would be a good time now to hear some examples. And I think CJ has something that we can have a look into, so that we can have the audio to the language that we are putting here.
Sure, happy to show you. And thanks, Colin. I agree. All right. Can you guys all see this?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Got too many tabs open.
Too many tabs. This is how I do presentations. This is Zach and I presenting our scientific research on generating albums with this technique. We generate audio music with neural networks. You might be familiar with other forms of synthesis, like additive synthesis, subtractive synthesis, granular synthesis, maybe not. Neural synthesis is the new kid on the block, and it's using this kind of technology. So audio is just a sequence of amplitudes, and much like making a model that predicts the weather, like here's today's, tomorrow's weather. Try to predict the next week of weather, given the history of what just happened. Similar reasoning is going on at this low level of audio, and that's how we do neural synthesis. So here's an animation. The past is going through some layers. These layers are neurons. They've learned by seeing millions of examples of what music looks like, and now it's making a prediction on what's going to come next. And here these predictions are very, very tiny. It's sub millisecond. So many of these predictions are happening per second. And yeah, we in a normal year we would be going to your country telling you all about it. So we made waves when we published this paper called Generating Black Metal and Math Rock Beyond Bach, Beethoven, and Beatles. Most computer science music people were interested in analyzing Bach and how to make algorithms that can do Bach. And a lot of those approaches were using MIDI, because MIDI can just represent pitch and velocity, which is enough for a piano generally, but it's not good enough to capture the timbres of someone's voice or the atmosphere of a black metal album. And for this reason, we're going beyond Bach into raw audio, and seeing what we can do with music there. And I got some attention, and for this record in particular, which is a neural remix of Colin's album Diotima from Kralis. So I'll just give you an example of what it sounds like. So that's the human version. We hear guitars doing tremolo picking. We hear drums blast beating, ga 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 ga, and in a vocal style.
Not bad.
Yep. So now we take this album and we give it to a neural net. And what does that mean? It means that the neural net is looking at the amplitude, and trying to make all these predictions about what's going to come next, and it listens to the album maybe 20, 30, 40 times through. If it were to listen to it thousands of times, it would eventually memorize it. It would be able to spit it out verbatim, assuming the neural net is large enough. But here, we don't have enough resources. We haven't been able to actually achieve memorization yet, because it's expensive to run these. But also we're not interested in memorization. We don't want it to just imitate what humans do. We want it to make something new. Right. So here actually we it's called early stopping. You stop the training before it's learned much, and then you ask it to generate. Here's where we're gonna get all these weird behaviors, weird inhuman things that are being strung together like music. So yeah, there's in the structure of what we're hearing, we're not hearing repetition, but instead we're hearing this wandering from pattern to pattern with really interesting transitions. And if you're very familiar with the original album, you'll recognize where each of these small parts maybe came from on the album, and it's stringing it together in this way that was not how it's done on the album. And it's a much different experience if depending on your familiarity with it. But even for people that don't listen to black metal, that haven't listened to Krallis, they loved hearing this. They love just like seeing what a neural net would do with music, and just getting a feel for the personality of it, and also just at a time where you're reading about AI being used for surveillance or for crunching your private data to sell it to marketers. It's relieving to see someone make metal with it. So yeah, this is Colin Marston. He's a beast. If you didn't know.
It's Chris Arp in the background from Psyopus.
Oh, it's Chris Arp in the background.
Photo.
Oh my god. Chris Arp, also a beast guitarist, huge inspiration on me as well from Psyopus. And we have a Christopher ArpNet as well.
Oh, nice.
So that's an example from Behold the Octopus that Colin was talking about earlier, which is, for me, this hyperstructure. Like, it almost even appears like architecture in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. And I can see how it's totally just chaos to the uninitiated, but like I hear it as a continuation of process music and minimalism, and some very like regimented kind of thing you have to get through to make it to the end of the piece. That was my impression when I first heard that album.
Yeah, the one that you played is a good example. It's almost the most extreme example, but I think that's maybe good because that's probably our piece with the least repetition. It's literally just a stream from beginning to end. So in a way, it's like it makes all of our other songs are like seem a little bit like more like the Ramones in comparison.
So I'm going to show you a video of a YouTuber critic, the Needle Drop, and his reaction to hearing Coditany of Timeness.
Oh, that's really weird. It makes me smile because I'm actually kind of amazed by it. It obviously doesn't sound like much and is not that inspiring from a compositional standpoint, but the aesthetic is there. I mean, it's not perfectly clean and well assembled and smoothed out like the way that Krallice's sound is, but to me it sounds like I'm honestly listening to a live demo of Krallice. There's kind of a weird trebly ambient noise around a lot of the sounds in the mix for some reason. I don't know why exactly that is, if that's kind of a kink that they need to work out in whatever they're making the computer do to generate these sounds. But still, I mean, if you had told me this was a band of people playing live, honestly, I would believe you. I mean, maybe they're playing a little...
Yeah, so for many people, it passes the Turing test. It's something you could put on and, you know, trick your friends. What's, you know, unique here... Sorry, that was Kurt Cobain bot screaming Jesus. So sorry. This is our first experiment. Like the very first thing we tried was throw sacrificial lamb, throw Kurt Cobain into the net. And we thought it would be like silence or noise, or like some bug, and like no, it like literally screamed Jesus, which was it, like it hit us.
Let me ask you something, CJ. Which just a little bit as a piece in between, because I'm really curious about that problem.
Yeah.
You mentioned, for example, that if you run the neural network long enough, it will create a memorization of what it's hearing, which basically would be like a really clean replica of what he's hearing. But that's probably the most boring part of it.
That's the most boring part of it, right?
Yeah. So
it is your goal if you're trying to train a like autoencoder, like you're trying to make a new audio file format and you want it to reproduce it exactly. Obviously that's your aim, but if you're just trying to create something, like you don't want that. You want it to be imperfect. You want to do something weird. You want it to be half learned. You want its unique personality coming out. We obviously disagree with the Needle Drop there. Like it is very inspiring to us compositionally. There's structure and coming out of this that is inhuman, that I've never heard of before, that inspires me deeply.
We have had some conversations within our studio and also other colleagues in architecture whether it's actually necessary that humans understand what AI is creating culturally or not. Maybe it's not even for us, So, but the question is also, I mean, I really admire the work. I think this is really super interesting, because several of the things that you hear in the audio you're creating appear also visually in the work we do, in terms of artifacts that are created by the process that generate things that are more interesting to us than a clean result.
Right.
So when we do style transfer with plans, and suddenly things come out that, you take Baroque plans and you take modern plans, you do a style transfer, those plans, if they're made, they're not going to look either like Baroque nor like modern plans. There will be something completely different.
Right.
And that's what is so exciting about it. It's not just meshing up stuff. It's really creating something new in the process.
Right. It's like appreciating the waste product that comes out of it or something. I mean, that's not a great way of encapsulating it, but it's like all the accidents, all the stuff that doesn't make sense or right away is the good stuff.
It's like Dijon, finding the toilet and putting it, just giving it the mark of that's what you have to look at. That's the piece of art. And it's I love the discussions we have in studio and also with colleagues about the work that is generated through this process. I'm sure for music, I think music has one advantage. Music has always been labeled already, so there are these genres already, and you don't have to do excruciating task of doing your own database that you have to label yourself, because it's something we also as architects, something it's time consuming, but it's also gives you the frame to forces you to really think about the aesthetic qualities of architecture per se, so whether they are personal or more subjective. But I envy people who are working with music as they're already working with labeled data, so that saves you a lot of time, I assume. So when you're talking about these models, how do you search for these databases, or how many samples would you need for Colin's Bandits, for example?
Great question. So we love living in this unsupervised learning world. So we try to use we're not interested in using labels so much as just like constructing the training data, and not telling it, here's, this is the drum, this is guitar, and not telling it, here's this, A-B section. It's just, here's the raw audio, no labels, just extract what patterns you can from it and generate from it, which is a much easier process. Normally the most time consuming part of machine learning and data science is constructing these databases. It's very tedious and time consuming. But with unsupervised learning, it's just about throwing it raw data and trying to work with it.
So how much data would you need for a system that you have the feeling, no one else, but you personally have the feeling, okay, I think that's exactly for me the right ratio. It's not an accuracy rate of 1 that I want to achieve, but something in between 0.5 and 1, I assume. So what? How much data does it need how do you evaluate that?
Basically a whole album, but we do some tricks to stretch it out to be a little bit more than the length of an album. What's really nice about a musical album is that the producer and the mastering engineers have already normalized all the signal and made sure that it sounds the same and continuous through all of it, which is great. And that's one of the struggles we have mixing music from different albums with the sample RNN architecture. We think that having a very similar production aesthetic throughout the whole data set is really helpful. We do little tricks to make it stretch out longer, like we might take the right and the left channel and merge them in different ways, or invert the waveform so that positive is negative. And this just stretches out more examples of audio waves that it can generate.
Cool.
And at the end, after it's, or even as it's training, it's spitting out audio, tons of audio. And so we might get 10 hours of audio. And so we even made a tool just for exploring that. We call it DOME, the Disproportionately Oversized Music Explorer. And it does a bunch of fingerprinting and just, lets you navigate. It's a lot. It's a lot of audio to go through. You find the gems, parts that like, oh, that sounds like a really nice song. And then we'll put that on the album.
Gotcha.
I have maybe a question about some of your, I was listening to some of your stuff before we had this presentation, and I found something that I thought was really hilarious, which was this, the Bohemian Rhapsody done with flutes.
Yeah.
So basically sort of a style transfer between Queen and I don't know what you use for the flute samples, but for sort of a style transfer was happening there, which I thought was absolutely hilarious because it sounds incredible. And one of the things I thought was really amazing about this is that I looked at that video on YouTube and the YouTube algorithm suggested Jethro Tull.
Nice.
So obviously recognized something in there.
Right.
That shows, okay, how much this training is already going on. Like, and for your information, like about 2 weeks ago, we recorded a video like this one today with Arthur Flexer from the Austrian Institute of Artificial Intelligence, who is a pioneer in music retrieval. And basically was explaining also a lot of like how basically those algorithms work and operate, and was really super exciting to see how some probably of the work that he did, I don't know, 20 years ago, is now part of our everyday life. And I thought it's kind of amazing that there's this combination now between work that was done by Arthur about 20 years ago in terms of music retrieval and recognizing melodies and genres specifically, and your work that actually takes up genre and converts it into something completely defamiliarized and estranged, creating sort of a novel musical genre in itself by doing so. So that's a really interesting example, this one. Amazing.
Great. I'll just play a quick 30 seconds from it so you know what we're... Mm-hmm. So here we're mixing two different neural nets. We take Bohemian Rhapsody, we split it into its separate instruments using a neural net called Open Unmix. There are other ones that do this, like Spleeter. And then we resynthesize the bass, the voice, and the other parts with a flute synthesizer. And this is also neural. And it's looking just for the frequency. So it only does monophonic pitch. And then it tries to synthesize and a piece of audio. And so DDSP is actually really nice for introductory machine learning music people that want to get into this, because it runs really, really quickly in the browser. And also it trains really quickly. So you could train it within 10 minutes on your own custom data set. It could be, 10, 20 minutes of your guitar playing, could be even your singing voice. And then you'll make a model then can fit into this kind of process. So
in this case, it's really amazing that it sounds like a bunch of people who barely can play flute are trying to play the Bohemian Rhapsody. The thing itself is just so cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean the thing that I noticed is just all the pitch bends in the flute, which you're not used to hearing that on a flute, because I mean I think it's somewhat possible with overblowing and stuff, but you can't really do it that controlled and dramatically, or at least nobody does. So it has this, it's like, yes, I'm listening to a flute. Flutes don't do that.
Right. It was Zach who said that machines should be just absurd versions of ourselves. That's the realm that they should be in.
Yeah, making decisions that we would not make.
Thank you for bringing that up, because actually that would be something I would like to ask you. I mean, you obviously have a relationship to Dada. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be called Dadabots. Now, how did that come up?
Zach?
Well, I think we were, again, just interns at Berkeley and joking around about it. How did we exactly come up with it? I think that we were going to go to the MIT Music Hack Day, and we wanted to have a project name. And our project was something like infecting SoundCloud with serialist Dadaist robots for music mischief, or something absurd like that. And I feel like the name just immediately came out of that. And obviously, like, there's this connection to like production art and just taking the past and like throwing it into a blender because we want to start from a new origin. And, there's been a lot of reincarnations of that movement in many ways. And so, yeah, obviously it does have a nod to that type of like conceptual art form. And we're, thinking about it in a machine way in the modern sense that we have today.
I mean, it's very fitting considering the fascination of Dada with machines. So they were really obsessed with them and considered them being pieces of art. I mean, think about Tanguy, and also Sandra mentioned before Duchamp, and like one of his most incredible arts, the big glass, which actually just represents a machine. So I think there is like a really interesting relationship between, of course, the fascination with the absurd, but also with the machine creating something absurd, right?
And a recontextualization of the absurd too, I think is
exactly
important. The toilet, what's it called? Fountain. I mean, it's just
Fountain,
like,
yes.
I just put it in a museum and called it Fountain. That it's like, that's all it took. And now we're sitting there laughing about it and it's making us think. And it's like, yes, okay, effective piece of art. You win.
What I really dig about the possibilities of neural synthesis is that you can construct all different kinds of processes that no one has thought of yet. And for example, here's a totally different process from what we were showing earlier with codicity of timeness. where we're just throwing unconditional one album into a net. Here, we're splitting it up and resynthesizing it. And one thing that really inspires me about Colin's projects in general is that each of them seems to have a different kind of process. And I don't know if Colin can talk about the different processes, but it's in Synthrack, it seems like maybe I don't know if like Weasel improvises drums first, and then you guys compose on top of it. Versus Kralis, I don't know how that stuff's written. It's like there's different ways of like who's going to improvise, who is responding to that, and in the recording process, does all the band play together, or is it tracked? There's a wide variety of that, and the different way you approach it creates makes a whole different style of music. And Colin even goes so far as like, okay, no, this is like, even though it's the same musicians, almost like it's just a whole new project. Just give it a whole new name, whole new aesthetic. Just being in tune with those differences in process make differences in style. And yeah, I don't know if this is obviously something we're working towards with each of our projects. It's like, but yeah, Colin, can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. So, like you sort of already mentioned. I'd say there's maybe almost like three basic categories of the way I work on stuff. There's music that's fully improvised, there's music that's partially improvised, and there's music that's fully written with basically no improvisation. Kralis would be one with no improvisation. I mean, there might be little bits here and there, solos and stuff, but 99.9% of what you hear is exactly worked out, exactly played the same way every time. Behold the Octopus would maybe even be a more extreme example, because in that one I'm with Kralis, I might write a song on guitar and, like a normal rock band, bring it to the band. We work on the drums collaboratively, or maybe I have a little bit of an idea in advance. The other guitar player writes his part, the bass player writes his part, someone writes lyrics, does vocals. With Behold, it's like classical music where I'm writing everybody's part. I write the drums beginning to end verbatim, the guitar beginning to end verbatim, and my part, give it to the other musicians, and then we play it like an ensemble. In Synthrack, the first album is entirely improvised. So 2 guitars and drums playing together with no plan, with literally no anything, just here's what comes out, overdub the vocals improvised, and it's done. For the new album, we did the same process, but we deleted all the improvised guitars, and I went back and I wrote guitar to go with the improvised drums, like exactly.
Right.
And I kind of made the joke of like, oh, the new album just has better production. That's the only difference. But the difference was that it's a completely different process, or 50% different process. So yeah, and I like all of these different. It's interesting because, yeah, you can have these projects with like 2 or 3 of the same people, but just because the process is different and we have just a vague difference in aesthetic, like this one's death metal, this one's whatever, this one has no genre, and keeping it basically just as simple as that, and then seeing what comes out, and then basing whatever the next album is on whatever we learned from the previous one. So I feel like you guys are coming at Dadabots in a similar way, where it's like, okay, we did one project, we set the AI to key in on these things and create something this way. So what did we like about that? What worked really well? What didn't work as well? What's a new place to explore? Let's take like these elements of the previous one, this new element, and let's see what happens with that. And then based on how that came out, you move on to a third idea. So yeah, like not really that different from like sitting down with a guitar or a band and composing music. You're just doing it with AI as the instrument instead of just the guitar or the drum kit or whatever.
Right.
Maybe building up on Colin's comment, I would have one specific question also to CJ and Zach, because it really hints a lot to one comment that you guys made, which I'm really interested into, which is that you noticed that organically generated music works much better with the neural network processes that you're doing than electronically generated music. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what the differences are.
Oh, let's see. Well, I think with organic, there's just a more of a variety of pattern for it to learn from. So you're giving it like a better teaching material because it's denser. Because with organic acoustic ensembles of musicians, they're never playing it. It's not the same waveform every time you play a note. Whereas with electronic music, that is the case. So then there's this tendency of it to memorize what it's already heard. And electronic music, it's loop based and there's a variety of timbres. And so that just doesn't particularly work well with sample RNN, that specific neural architecture. Other architectures, sure, it would have to be a lot different. But with sample RNN in particular, like organic music all the way, and this is because it's bottom up training. It's looking at the smallest pattern and then like sticking them together. And so so it works really well when you have a narrow timbre range. So like a metal band is a really great example because it's the same instruments the whole time, the same production style the whole time, but they're playing totally different patterns over and over, and a huge variety of different patterns. So that seems to play towards sample RNN's strength, and that's why tech metal, free jazz works, like just free acapella, beatboxing works really well. And like hip hop and EDM didn't really work so well with this method.
Yeah, it's like you want self-similar timbre, but you want the actual content to be vast. And electronic music is almost like the opposite, where you have much more exact repetition. It's sample based. So it's interesting because if you tried doing I think you already did because you guys have the Archspire one, but I was going to say if you did something with more like modern metal production where it's less organic, where it sounds more like a drum machine, I wonder if you'd run into the same kind of things. But I think having that distorted guitar and the vocals is enough to give it that human quality. And another thing that got me thinking too is just it's like what you guys want is imperfection. What you want is like imperfection creates this like almost infinite amount of content to be analyzed. And that's something that just comes with being a human. You can't play things exactly the same way every time. And so it's just like, it's interesting because like one way of looking at that is, we got to like get that out of the music, which is like what I hate about so much modern production. And then the other way of looking at it is like, that's beautiful. That's like what's beautiful about humans is that you can't fucking do it the same way every time. It's like there's this grit and this like infinite like fractalized complexity built into just every note that a human will play. And so that's the kind of thing where like getting a computer to try to interpret that, it kind of can't quite do it, so it's going to come up with this thing that's not exactly the result you expect.
Right, exactly. Right, and this is why I love Colin's approach to production. It's always been about those imperfections, the organicness. It's not trying to be this perfect machine like maybe other tech metal production aims to be, which ends up working really well with our research, incidentally.
Maybe one more also based on the whole conversation you're having, guys, because I think that's also something that we have been trying to discuss in architecture. I don't know if we have a solution yet, but it's an interesting conversation, is to ask yourself whether an AI can be creative at all. Or is it, because it's a question that pops up occasionally, like for example, when you run a neural network with specific music samples, what comes out is not going to be recognizable as one specific track or song. It's something new and different, and the question is it now really something, is that a creative process, or is this just embedded within the code that you created? So is the creativity with you, the coder, the musician who created the database it's based on, or the final result that comes out?
But hey, I mean,
is
like,
really...
just as a human composer, aren't I not just that? Aren't I just like, I hear stuff, I hear music, I take it in, I might remember little bits of this or that, or this one little bit of Metallica here and there, and I sit down with my guitar and I write a song, and like, that's all in there. That's all like influencing what I come up with. So in a way, it's like not different.
Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. Yeah, that's cool. Good. So in architecture, we've been discussing this for a while now, and of course, I mean, you can imagine there's resistance to the idea that a machine can be creative, right? I mean, it's also in any ways a matter how you really specify and define it. Colin made a very specific definition now. Like he said, okay, there is like things that influence me as an artist, and that will be what I create. Picasso once said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." Right, so he was very aware about that problem too, right? That there's specific things that actually influence your work, and that creativity doesn't come out from nothing. I mean, that's also clear. Yeah,
you need a starting point. You just start with a vacuum.
You need a starting point, and I think like one of the coolest examples I've seen proving that point, that there is a specific creative aspect going on in AI, is in this famous Lee Sedol and AlphaGo game, where AlphaGo came up with a move that a human would never do, but that move made him win the game, right? So that showed that there is something happening here which is outside of what we would think of in let's say Go or music or architecture, whatever you take. I think it's exchangeable. Before you described it also as these sort of accidents that happen when you're doing these sort of processes, and I think exactly those are the things. The only thing that we as humans still can do better than an AI, in my opinion, in that process, is that we can recognize opportunity in a mistake.
Right.
Like saying, okay, that's interesting, that's cool, I can do something with that, right? AIs are not able yet to do that yet. I mean, it might come at some point, but really to recognize actually an advantage in a mistake.
Totally.
Yeah, I think on some level, you can call any of these things that AI does as a creative act. We might need to be there to witness it, to call it that creative act, though, in the end. I think that, like, we're going to be the ones to put the urinal in the art gallery and be like, this is the new thing. It might not have the reason to make the art, which if you define creativity as like, I have this feeling and I want to express it. Should I write a poem? Should I draw a picture? Should I write a song? It might not have that level of creativity for a while or ever, but it can assist us in like tasks in our creative goals, I think, and it could help us enhance our own creativity by showing us things that we haven't thought of, or just presenting the world to us in a creative way. So yeah, I just think that the definition of creativity might be different for different people when they're having this discussion too. And it's hard to deny that there is something being created by AI that is outside of ourselves. I think that is pretty obvious, and that's why we're all here talking about it. But I don't think that's the type of creativity that's just going to like flat out replace us anytime soon either. I think that we have tons to contribute to AI's creativity, the same way a producer could help get the best tracks out of a vocalist, and they're working collaboratively on the end goal, which is an album.
What we're experiencing is that the appreciation of what's happening currently is going to come, but it's not there yet, of course, because it's such a new artistic environment. You see the same thing also in the arts when it comes to style transfer paintings and things like that. Yeah, it's getting a little bit more recognition since one of those paintings was sold for $500,000, but there is obviously this conversation is coming along in a variety of different disciplines of the arts. I mean, AI poetry has been out there basically for 50 plus years. And it's just getting traction now because of development of new networks. I mean, the development of generative adversarial networks, that's not even 3 years ago or 4 years ago or something like that.
Right, yeah, I kind of talk about it now as if we have all of the genres mapped out, and they're all discrete points. And right now we're blending them, and we're exploring the points between. But we have this whole boundary that humans have been in. And what if we could start generating the points outside of our boundary, and then those neural nets start following each other away from the herd of humans, never to be seen again?
Right.
Yeah, actually, that makes actually a lot of sense. I mean, there's a similar conversation we have had within architecture. We actually wrote a paper a couple of years ago called "The Church of AI," where basically this was a work that was done together with students. Where there was the speculation that we as humans don't actually penetrate that layer of understanding what AI, for example, considers worship. Yeah, if there is something like that. And the same would be valuable for any other kind of metaphysical object, whether it's music or architecture or painting or whatever it is, there might be at some point, as Zach rightfully said, this sort of layer where it's hidden from human perception. Yeah, because it's either, let's say, for example, music that is outside the audible range. Yeah,
Right.
but it's still music. Yeah.
Good point.
So,
Just music that's all above 20 kilohertz.
yeah. It's still music. We just don't hear it anymore.
Not
Right.
for consumption.
Yeah, or with the example of the game of Go, you know, if the AI starts to create its own game, then, you know, so where's the point when we know that it's following the rules of Go or just stretching the game, you know, so start to designing its own game. And I think those are parameters that you could evaluate, you know, so how far from the curve is creativity, you know, so how far do you stretch it from the curve, and how much do you want to be as close as possible or not close as possible from this curve to have a creativity at least as we are experiencing it. So, but I think all those games keep us through the next pandemic, keep us busy, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah, live streams have been a really good way to keep us busy during the pandemic. With Colin, we did an album release party for the new Incenithrack album. By we made a generative version of the record, and you know, thousands of people showed up to listen to this, and it felt like a noise show, where.
But the biggest noise show ever.
Yeah, like the biggest noise show ever.
I mean, you guys are the first. I think you're the first YouTube channel I ever subscribed to. I'm not even subscribed to our own channel, so I was really so excited when Matias told me about you, and I find some like-minded minds. Also, I'm super appreciative of the aesthetics of the visuals. Who does the visuals for your channel?
Oh,
We do it together, but CJ does a lot of it.
Yeah.
Great work, yeah.
We do a lot of it. Sometimes we'll hire artists to do it. Sometimes we're just training algorithms on the original artworks. And yeah,
that one's trained on the original, the animation you were just showing. It was funny because the Piran who put out the new Incenithrack, one of the two guys at the label, didn't realize that this artwork was the same thing as the music. He thought it was just a loop. And he was like, I saw this one thing and then it never seemed to come back. And I'm like, yeah, it's being generated. Like the music, like, whoa!
Oh, it's hilarious. Oh my god. Yeah. And I don't know if everybody knows this, but this right here, I think right, Zach, who is this?
That's me.
Should be Colin from
Colin.
Wikipedia. Yeah.
Right, you know, I didn't realize that for a week.
Oh, really?
Here, there's the guitar.
There's the guitar.
Oh, cool.
I seriously thought it was like just some landscape. I didn't
Me
see.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a style transfer between a photo of Colin from Wikipedia and their album cover. So it uses the texture of that album cover here for Diotima, and then it used a photo that I found on Wikipedia.
Very cool.
Thanks so much, Colin. I really appreciate talking about all this stuff that we've been kind of pinging back and forth for the last few years. It's cool to formally do this.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to you guys, and it's nice to meet the two of you as well. And thanks for having me.
Let's come together soon again. I'll keep you posted. It would be super fun to have you for a review. Actually, that would be something interesting. We can try to do that. I keep you posted. Thank you again for your time. It was amazing. What a fantastic body of work, guys. And yeah, I'm super curious to hear the next stuff that you're going to come up with.
Yeah.
Colin, thanks a lot. Zach, thanks for being here. CJ, thanks a lot again. Let's keep in touch on Twitter and so on, and let's see you take it from here. I'll
Really?
keep you posted about the video when I cut stuff together, and I'm gonna send it to you, and you can tell me if that's okay for posting it, and we're gonna take it from there. All right?
All right.
Bye.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Bye, everyone.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah.